Hello everyone, my name is Eddie Bolen. I'm the pastor at Midway United Methodist Church. I'm also the pastor at Edgewater United Methodist Church. I want to thank you so much for taking some time and for watching this video. As I was preparing this message and going back through looking at my final notes and looking at the final touches on it, something that I often do. It was Thursday morning for me as I was doing this, and it was the Thursday after a Wednesday when in my state, in the state of Alabama, that we were recovering from several severe storms that passed through our state on Wednesday and also passed through our state overnight on Wednesday night early into Thursday morning. In fact, on Thursday morning, there was an unknown number of tornadoes that were in our state, and it's kind of extraordinary because the National Weather Service out of Birmingham was sending out two different teams to survey damage. There was one team that was going to 4 different counties. There was a second team that was going to 3 different counties. And I wanted to mention that. It kind of grabbed a hold of my attention, as well as many other people, because, you know, living in Alabama, we know storms. I mean, we know what storms are like. We know how to prepare for storms. We know how to get ready for storms. In fact, this is kind of unique, a unique place that I am in right now, because I'm not only paying attention to storms in my own state, my own home state, but my son has moved to another state and is living in another state. So now I do this too. I pay attention to warnings. I pay attention to watches in an entirely other state where my son is currently living. Something that all of us, we know how to do, especially when you live in a place like Alabama. We know how to get ready. We know how to prepare for storms. And we know this. We know that this time of the year that you've got to have a plan, and that you've got to be able to follow that plan. A plan that's really quite simple. It's a plan to how are you going to prepare for the storm? How are you going to stay safe if you find yourself in the midst of the storm? And then the third part to that is how you're going to recover from the storm. And just think about that. Think about your own experiences with storms. And as you prepare for those storms, you know, what is your preparing? What is your staying safe? What is your recovering from that? And if someone were to ask you, what is your storm plan? Well, if you live in my state, I imagine you have a pretty good one. And if someone were to move in, if someone were to come into the state of Alabama, there's a lot of us. I know many of the folks, well, almost all of the people at Edgewater and Midway would all be able to offer you a do-it-yourself, a DIY plan for preparing, for staying safe and recovering from a storm. But what would you say? What would you say if at 3 o'clock in the morning, that you got an alert that said there was a storm that was coming to your house? Would you know how to prepare to stay safe, to recover? Would you have a plan already in place? Again, many people in our state do. Almost all the people in our state do, because we know. We know the dangers of it, and we know that these plans, that we had to make these plans just like our lives depend on it. And so that's what we're going to talk about, is we're going to talk about a plan. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about having a life plan to prepare to stay safe and recovery. I also want to let you know that before we start our conversation about a life plan and about developing our own life plan, I want to let you know that we are meeting for in-person worship at Edgewater United Methodist Church at 9:20 a.m. on Sunday mornings. We are meeting at Midway United Methodist Church at 10:45 a.m. on Sunday mornings. At both churches, we are meeting in the sanctuary. If you'd like to come, and if you'd like to be a part of those, of either one of those worship services, I'd like to invite you to come and be a part of those. I want you to know that we are doing those things that we know can keep us healthy and safe during this time. We are wearing masks, and so you'll be required to wear a face mask, a mask that covers your mouth as well as your nose, the whole time you're around the church. When you're in the parking lot, when you're on the sidewalk, when you're inside the church building, you'll be required to wear that the entire time. You'll also be required to maintain at least 6 feet of social distance between you and the people that you do not live in the same household with. Also, if you find yourself sick, or if you find yourself with a fever, past few days, past couple of weeks, just make sure that you are healthy enough, just in your own evaluation, healthy enough to come and be a part of a group gathering as we are doing during this time. Also know that we are doing some extra sanitizing, some extra cleaning. We're also eliminating some common touch surfaces. We will not be passing offering plates around. So those things that we can do just to make sure that everyone is safe and they are healthy. But we do, we worship, like I said, in the sanctuary at Edgewater, 9:20 a.m. on Sunday mornings. We also worship at Midway in the sanctuary, 10:45 a.m. Love to have all of you come and be a part of that worship service. And it will be a worship service on this Sunday when we're talking about, our life plans. The kind that maybe, have you really thought about that before? Have you really thought about a plan that is able to move you in a place where you are prepared, where you can stay safe, and where you can recover? And you may start to think, well, prepare, stay safe, recover. Well, what from? Well, for everything. That's what I'm really talking about. Talking about everything in your life, because the world that we have been experiencing has become quite clear. And that's all I wanted to share with you. Just the place where I'm sitting at as I'm making this video. We know that our world is volatile. We know that it's uncertain. We know that it's complex. We know that it's ambiguous. And so that is what I'm asking you about. Have you thought about what is your prepare, stay safe, and your recovery plan for this world? What about our own season together? Now, we all know that we're going to continue to experience spring storms. We're going to be continued in this world where we are affected by COVID-19, a continued pandemic. Also, we are coming into, right now, an increasingly vaccinated world. That is a universal world that all of us share. Me, where I'm at, you, wherever you are watching this video from, these are the things that are happening, that there are storms that are going to come around us. There's a continued pandemic that is affecting our lives, and also this increasingly vaccinated world. I was talking to a couple of people just this past week. I said, what are people talking about? They said vaccines. I said, that's what people are talking about. It's what I hear over and over and over again. Whatever your plan is, whatever your life plan is, and maybe you've never even thought about it before. Maybe you've never thought about a plan. You might have thought about it for storms. You might have thought about it for a trip or for a vacation, but you never really thought about in your own life, what is my plan for preparing, for staying safe, and for recovery? And if you've not, that's why we're talking about it, because it's something all of us need. Whatever your plan is, whatever your life plan is for preparing, for staying safe, and for recovering, that plan is completely dependent on what the Bible talks about as self-control, or what you may think about in your own life as willpower. Self-control is an aspect of what the Apostle Paul calls the fruit of the Spirit. This is Galatians chapter 5. Galatians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul says this. He says, and this becomes Holy Scripture for us, is that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I've previously talked about the fruit of the Spirit, all of those aspects of the fruit of the Spirit that we've shared. And so right now, as we think about our life plans, as we think about our plans together, I want to talk a little bit about self-control, because your life plan will either rise or fall based on your self-control or willpower. In fact, your storm plan will too. But most people have that so well ingrained into their lives that they have enough willpower, they have enough self-control to carry it out even when they get the alert at 3 a.m. Well, here's the good news for us. That as you begin to think about this, as you begin to think about your life plan, here's the good news for us, is that for Paul, and the Apostle Paul, Romans chapter 7, it's in the New Testament, it's a book in the New Testament, but Romans chapter 7 gives us a front row seat about self-control and about willpower. Because what we get to see is that we get to see the Apostle Paul's willpower or his self-control worked out in real time. And his own struggle with his own willpower becomes Holy Scripture for us as followers of Jesus Christ. In fact, Romans chapter 7, verse 17 says this, but the whole chapter really focuses on, we get to see Paul as he struggles to understand his own self-control, his own willpower. But Romans chapter 7, verse 17 says this, but I need something more. And how many of you have felt that way before? That you have said, you know what, I need something more. And I hope that you're grasping onto that. I hope that you're watching this video because you have said to yourself, you know what? I need something more in my life. Remember, this is a place where we're coming to, that we're in a prepare stage in our life plan. So this, I need something more. Think about this in the prepare state. This is what Paul says. He continues, Romans chapter 7, verse 17 through 20. I'm reading from a translation of the Bible. It's called The Message. I think it's done excellent in Romans chapter 7. I think it's a wonderful translation. But he says, but I need something more. Paul says this, I obviously need help. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, willpower. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. And notice how Paul says that. He says, I can will it, but I can't do it. It's the struggle between good, the struggle between bad that Paul talks about. And it is a struggle that is as old as the origins of human beings. It's a struggle that we see with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It's a struggle that we see with Cain and Abel. It's a struggle that we even see with Jesus and Satan. That our willpower, just like Paul's, willpower is something, our own self-control is a renewable but diminishing resource. You ever thought about that before? That your own self-control, your willpower, is a renewable but diminishing resource. This is what Paul is talking about. Our willpower and self-control is strongest in our lives in the morning. It's why so many people will work out early in the day. It's why so many people will exercise. They'll take a walk early in the day as soon as they wake up because they recognize that their willpower, their self-control is the strongest early in the morning. Grocery stores even know this. Grocery stores know that our self-control, they know that our willpower, that it is diminishing over time. And they build their stores based on this kind of diminishing willpower and self-control that we have because they know that we can walk into a grocery store and we can shop all the way around the grocery store and they know that we can avoid the candy. They know we can avoid cookies. They know we can avoid sodas. And they know we can do that all through the store. That is until we get to the register. Yeah, that's the reason why that's the reason why candy bars are at the register, because they know that they're much smaller portions than they are throughout the rest of the store. And they know that as we have walked through that store, that once we find ourselves all of a sudden with our baskets filled and we're waiting to check out, we know that all of a sudden we're captivated right there and we can begin to tell ourselves, you know what? You've done so good in the store. One's not going to hurt. And that's exactly right. One's not going to hurt. Just not one every single trip that we make to the grocery store. I'm in a family of 7. Yeah, there's lots of trips for us. And so one will hurt if it happens every trip that any of us go to the grocery store. But we have to prepare. We have to prepare just like we do for storms. We have to prepare knowing that our self-control and our willpower is renewable each day. That's the wonderful thing about our willpower and our self-control, is that it is renewable every day. But also know this, that it diminishes over time. This is exactly what the Apostle Paul is talking about. Holy Scripture says this, you know what? I can will it, but I can't do it. Because what Paul realizes is that his own self-control, his own willpower, he realizes that it diminishes over time, but it's able to be renewed. And so that's that prepare stage. That's what we have to prepare. That as we prepare in our own life plan, we have to prepare knowing that about ourselves, is that our willpower is a renewable resource, but it diminishes over time. And so how do we take the next step? How do we take that next step? How do we stack that on top of that next step of staying safe? Again, the Apostle Paul offers these words, Romans chapter 7. They're just personal words, but then in the Bible they become holy words for us. It happens so regularly that it's predictable. Romans chapter 7, verse 21. And aren't you grateful, thinking about storms and thinking about the spring storms in this place that we find ourselves in, but aren't you grateful for the National Prediction Center? Aren't you thankful for that? I'm thankful and a little bit wishy-washy sometimes, because I do know this, that it is because of the predictions of the National Storm Prediction Center. I know that's the reason why my children were put on a bus at 11 a.m. on Wednesday and they came home. I am. I'm thankful for the Prediction Center. I'm thankful that they were safe. Thankful for their teachers that they were able to be safe too. But what does the Bible say? What does the Bible say is so predictable? What is Paul talking about in his own experience? He says, you know what? It happens so regularly that it's predictable. But this is what he says. Romans chapter 7, verse 22 and 23. He says this, the moment that I decide to do good, sin. You know that? Sin is there to trip me up. I truly delight in God's commands, but it's pretty obvious that not all of me joins in that delight. Parts of me covertly rebel, and just when I least expect it, they take charge. How do these words move you? I mean, for me, they hit me every time. Every time I read them. Because Paul says that. He says, you know what? He says, I try to do good, sin is there to trip me up. I truly delight in God's commands, but not all of me. When I least expect it, those other parts, that not all of me portion of my life, that's what takes charge. And this helped me. This is why it moves me. I will tell you, Romans chapter 7, it really does move me. Because this helped me so much. It helped me more than anything else in my own spiritual growth and formation. When I was moving and trying to understand what a life lived as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, what that life looks like. Because what I was able to see in Romans chapter 7 is that after the initial relationship that begins with Jesus Christ, you know, that initial forgiveness of sins, that initial moment in our own lives when we come to Jesus and we say, Jesus, forgive me. Forgive me for those sins that I've committed. Forgive me for turning away from you. And then Jesus forgives us. This is what we talk about. We talk about this in the church. This is the moment that we are saved. It is the moment that we are redeemed. It is the moment that we are born again. You say saved and redeemed, born again from what? It is from an old self to a new self. It is from a life that will die and end on this earth to a life that will be lived in the kingdom of heaven with God. So that is what that forgiveness is, that initial, that's our first encounter that we have with Jesus Christ, that initial encounter of Jesus coming into our lives, forgiving us of our sins. But then we move on. This is what we talk about. Some people talk about it maturing. Some people talk about it as developing. Some people talk about it as being formed, spiritual formation. Some people will even talk about it as being sanctified. This is that next place of developing and living as a follower of Jesus. Because our willpower, as Paul says this, our willpower, our self-control has the potential to be reshaped by God. You see, that's what happens after our initial forgiveness with Jesus Christ, that as we begin to live this life, then our own self-control, our own willpower has the potential to be reshaped by God, and that's how we grow spiritually. That's how we mature spiritually. That's how we move towards sanctification. Forgiveness is just the beginning of our lives with Jesus. Jesus lived a life on this earth. We get to see it in his life. Jesus lived a life on this earth. He was free from sin. And as the Spirit drove Jesus into the wilderness early in his life, and as the Spirit drove Jesus into the wilderness to face multiple temptations, he came out safely and began a ministry. Well, it's not just a ministry, but he really began his life that would change the world. But in the wilderness, there to trip Jesus up was sin. Sin that was offered by Satan. In fact, Satan will say this, if you are hungry, command these stones to become bread. And with self-control and willpower on full display, Jesus says this. He says, man does not live by bread alone. Now, I want you to imagine this, that as Jesus finds himself in the wilderness, and as Satan comes to him, as sin is tripping him up and say, command these stones to become bread. I want you to imagine that as those words leave Jesus' mouth, man does not live by bread alone. Imagine the parts of Jesus, his own body that is rebelling within him as he faces this temptation. Imagine his stomach growling. Imagine the excruciating headaches that we have when we haven't had enough to drink, when we have not had enough to eat. Imagine the low energy that comes from not eating. But three times Jesus faces temptation, and his self-control and his willpower are redeemed and reshaped by God in the wilderness. Redeemed meaning nothing more than they're used by God. You see, Jesus' willpower, his self-control is used by God to face those temptations in the wilderness. Your self-control, your willpower has the potential to keep you safe in moments that are almost too predictable. And we all know them. We all have those predictable moments when sin is there, eager to trip us up. Because in those moments, your self-control, if has the potential, if we allow God to redeem it, your self-control, willpower can be redeemed. That is used by God in those moments when sin is there to trip us up. So as we just reflect a little bit as we prepare, we know that our willpower, we know that our self-control is a renewable but diminishing resource. So that's how we prepare. We also know that our willpower, self-control can be redeemed, even when we are tripped up by the all too many predictable temptations that we face. It is the redeemed willpower, our self-control, that has the potential of keeping us safe. So how do we recover? What does recovery have to do with this? Well, just think about it. Just think about those moments that make us cheer the loudest, those moments that even have the potential to bring tears to our eyes after a storm. In the midst of all the chaos and the uncertainty, just think about those who come in, those who move in the direction of the storm. They come in risking their lives for recovery. And sometimes it's people that are trained professionals, but other times, immediately at the moment of impact, who are those first heroes? Who are those first people in? It's just regular folks. It's folks that saw something happen. They were in their storm shelter, and they come out and they begin to see. And what do? They start to help people to the very best of their ability. And what do we call them? I don't know what you call them, but I call them heroes. And they do. They bring tears to my eyes when I hear those stories, and when as occasionally I've had a chance to hear from them and talk to a few of them. Our hero in recovering our self-control and our willpower is Jesus, who, as the Gospel of John reminds us, who took on flesh and lived a life just like you and I lived on this earth. That's John chapter 1. Jesus took on flesh and lived a life just like us. Paul says this about his own self. Romans chapter 7 verse 24 says this, I tried everything and nothing helps. And then he says the answer is, thank God, the answer is that Jesus Christ can and does. He acted to set things right in this life of contradictions, where I want to serve God with all my heart and mind, but am pulled by the influence of sin to do something totally different. You see, it's when we are pulled by the influence of sin to do something differently, that's when we're in that recovery. That's when we need to recover. And so what we know about the fruit of the Spirit, what we know about self-control, what we know about willpower, is that even when we prepare for a diminishing but renewable source of willpower or self-control, even when we stay safe with a redeemed willpower or self-control in our lives on this earth, that we have to instill a recovery plan. Because we know what it's like to experience those moments in our own lives when we say, like the Apostle Paul, I tried everything and nothing helps. Romans 7:24. On this earth, we've got to instill that recovery plan. Because our self-control and our willpower, they will fail us. Even as we've prepared, even as we've tried to stay safe, they will fail us. But our fail-safe recovery plan is Jesus. In a life of contradictions, in a life of sin, Jesus is the one who sets things right. Jesus Christ is the recovery plan that we've all got to instill for us. Because our willpower, our self-control, it will diminish. It will fail us at times, but Jesus Christ is our fail-safe recovery. Well, I hope that this is really helpful for you. If you have not taken a look at all of Romans chapter 7, take a look at that chapter. It is tremendous in thinking about willpower and self-control. Well, I do hope that your family is safe. Hope that you are safe during this time, and may God's blessings be with all of you, both now and forevermore. Amen.